Let's talk about Caesar's invasion of Britain. Whenever I talk about Caesar, I always get so many comments being like, but which Caesar are you talking about? Guys, use your brain. It's very obvious who I'm talking about. The salad. Yeah, that's right. This salad's mother should be very proud of him. In theory. Do we know how his mother felt about G-side? Caesar Salad was in this place called Gaul, just hanging out doing this little thing known as the Gallic Wars. They're not worth talking about. Very uneventful time. Almost nothing happened. There's never been a less eventful time than the Gallic Wars. This time period was so uneventful that, like, in the middle of it, Caesar Salad just, like, went, what's over there? Pretend that I'm pointing across an ocean. Because I'm not by an ocean right now. I'm in my bedroom. But he was not the first Roman to go, but what's over there? Remember, like, I'm pointing at an ocean. Like, you know, I want you to... I'm pointing at an ocean. The first known Roman to end up in Britain was this guy named Pythias, who may have even made it as far as Iceland, which a big deal considering how hard travel was back in those days. But he came back with a lot of stories about these places on the edge of the world. Some people didn't believe him, thought he was crazy. That's another story. But Britain was kind of seen as this mystical, magical place on the edge of the world. Yeah, Britain was basically like North America's equivalent of like Japan. Do you think the anime was like that good? And in a lot of Roman Britain artifacts, they make direct connections between their takeover of Britain and their takeover of the ocean. And I can't talk about this right now because I'm trying to stay focused. But yeah, they saw taking over Britain as the same as taking over the ocean, kind of. Now the ocean was just like sitting there and not doing anything. But yeah, the Romans wanted to conquer it, which to be fair, the entire world was just sitting there and not doing anything. And when the Romans conquered, so I don't think there was much the ocean could have done. And you have to throw Alexander the Great in there. I'm trying to stay focused, but just know he is there. So Caesar was hoping to conquer the ocean, and the ocean just, like, went wave sounds. And apparently he tried stabbing it, but the ocean just, like, went... And, like, that pissed him off. And honestly, like, what were his options at that point? He was also mad that some people from the tribes of Britain came over to help Gaul, like that too. And, like, he would do that a lot. Use the native people's negative reaction to him invading as an excuse to go... invade them harder. Anyway, it's 55 BC. The Gallic Wars have been going on for 3 years, and Caesar decides that it's time for him to take this vacation. He gathers up 10,000 of closest friends and sent his other friend, Camillus, ahead. And then he followed him, and then he was stunned beyond belief that the Britons attacked him from land and that Camillus had been tied up. But you know what? When things get hard, you should keep going. And Caesar took that to heart every single time. He also wanted to get a closer look at the Britons' chariots and pet the horses, which, you know what, like, same. Caesar manages to land. He sets up a base, and the Britons immediately come over to discuss peace terms because they don't want to fight Caesar, and Caesar even gets a couple of them to pledge their loyalty to him. Unfortunately, though, he was not in a good place, and the Britons realized that. For one, he was a salad, and salads really don't hold up super well under pressure, and for two, he had no horses. The cavalry had literally not arrived, and a bunch of his ships were damaged, so the Britons basically just went, you know what, like, let's fucking fight, bro! But here's the thing, however, contrary to what Caesar and other Roman writers would go on to write, these groups of people were mostly just like hanging out and surviving a few wars here and there, but nothing like the descriptions that the Romans gave us. They were not these violent barbarians, they were just people. Like, you see, we use archaeology to make conclusions about people now. The Romans just used their audacity. Now, there are some Roman observations that I will not take criticism on, specifically the one that Caesar wrote about how one woman would be served by 10 to 12 men. You heard me, 10 to 12 men. I don't care if it's not true. I don't care if Caesar witnessed it himself, took some kind of hallucinatory drug and dreamed it, or he heard about it from somebody who was just screwing with him. As far as I'm concerned, that is true, and I am trying so hard to not get distracted. We're talking about Caesar and Britain. Anyway, yeah, the community of people who weren't warriors, who were just like hanging out and serving their ladies, weren't super organized and were bad at fighting. So, like, after a couple of scuffles, the Britons went, hey, like, if we give you some hostages, will you leave? And Caesar went, sure. And so he left to go back to the completely uneventful Gallic Wars. And then he immediately threw himself a giant party in Rome. There was a 20-day period of celebrations. Like, Caesar is me after I complete the 5-minute task I've been procrastinating on for over a year. But was Caesar done with Britain? No, he went back next year. But he had some good reasons. Kind of. So Caesar's very justifiable reasons for the second invasion included they didn't send enough hostages, and a Briton named Mandubracius came to see him to complain about a guy from a different tribe named Castelvanulus. I feel like I probably didn't pronounce that correctly. Apparently it's pronounced Castelvanus. So Castelvanus had killed Mandubracius' father and taken over his tribe, and so Mandubracius went to the Romans for help, and this was unfortunately like a thing. If there were issues within a community, someone would go to the Romans for help, and the Romans would use that as an excuse to invade, and we usually make the person who came to them a king. So at the end of July in 54 BC, our Caesar set out for Britain again, along with 20,000 men, 2,000 cavalry, and 800 ships. Like, I feel like Caesar would be that one of those girls who has 2 suitcases for 2 days, because like, what if there's a ball? Like, what if I need that evening gown? Which, like, I too am like Caesar. I get it. As I'm telling the story, I'm beginning to realize that me and Caesar may be soulmates, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. Caesar shows up, the Britons run away. Caesar chases after them because that means they're looking for a fight, obviously. Thankfully, though, this time the Britons had a plan. That guy, Castellovanus, he wasn't everyone's father, but he was the father who stepped up. There had been some kind of war going on between Castellovanus' people and the other tribes of Britain for some time, but Caesar's invasion forced them to work together under Castellovanus. But unfortunately, these people weren't used to working together. Something that the Romans always counted on. I hate this end of the story just as much as you do. I wish this was an underdog story. It's not! Caesar manages to defeat several tribes in a row who unfortunately reveal Castellovanus' location. Caesar traps him in some kind of like stronghold, and despite the fact that Castellovanus manages to send out word to other British chiefs for help, he eventually is forced to surrender. Strangely enough, though, Caesar actually left him alive, like once again just demanding some kind of like yearly tax and some hostages, and that his new friend Mandubratius could become the leader of his people, which I don't think anyone was expecting. This makes Castellovanus one of the only guys who's fought head-to-head with Julius Caesar, lost, and then lived to tell the tale. I do not know a lot about Caesar, but as far as I'm aware, like, mercy was not his thing. Castellovanus would kind of go on to become a legendary figure. There are stories about him being like really good at sex. Apparently he had an invisibility cloak, and he once fought with Caesar over a woman, and personally, I only find one of those things believable. The invisibility cloak. And Caesar went back to Gaul, and the Romans did not return to Britain for almost another 100 years. Nothing happened to Caesar, like, ever again. He had a very uneventful life after this. I'm just kidding, he became emperor of Rome, not bad for a salad, but then 60 to 70 senators decided they didn't want to be ruled by a salad, so they split the salad between them, but only 23 of them got a bite. And 2,000 years later, his legacy lives on through Tumblr, as every March 15th, the Tumblr community comes together to celebrate the day that the salad was eaten. It's a Tumblr thing, you won't get it. Anyway, that was Caesar's invasion of Britain. Bye! I feel like this is the beginning of a very funny shirt moment.